Howdy gang, thanks for checking with me. Jeremy here for a little tank talk on my 55-gallon planted gravel substrate tank. So I'll give you a little bit of a story on this. I purchased this tank from one of our club members, a friend, back in early January 2021. And it is largely as it was, though it is very different. I've added some rocks. He had Guppies and Bristlenose Ancistrus catfish living in here. So that's what the whatever you call them, clay watering spikes. That's what they are. That's why they're down in here. So there are actually 4 of those, and they are home to 2 down in there. You can't really see them too well, but they're side by side caves for the Ancistrus. And there is one hanging out that's probably a little female. She's too small to really know. He or she is too small to know. Let's see if we can find some others. There's one. Sometimes we can find adults. Sometimes they're really hard to find. Don't know where they are right now. Maybe... Oh, there's one way back in there hiding on the sponge filter. Definitely not a good time for that. So let me tell you about the tank itself. This is a small Sun flow pump. It's dead. It's about the cheapest pump you can buy on Amazon, 10, 12 bucks. And it lasted a couple of years. Died sometime after I put the big sponge filter on the outside of it. I mainly put that there because it was getting clogged with duckweed and ram's horn snails. When the snails would come close to the intake of this little pump, they just couldn't get away from it. It was too much flow, and the guppies are all trying to say hi. Anyway, I'll tell you about the guppies in a moment. 2 lights on this. Main lighting this was the first 24/7 light I got a number of years ago, probably in like 2015, 16, something like that. And it no longer has 24/7 dawn to dusk function. It still comes on, you can still see the lights, and I can control it using this. That works just fine. I think there's somewhere down in there's an IR sensor. Anyway, the other light is just a 5,000 lumen shop light that I purchased off of Amazon in a bundle of like 4 for $45, maybe a year or so ago. And it's great light. I think I first used those in my greenhouse. I had like 4 of them hanging in different corners, but they kind of got rained on. One of them failed, so they became indoor lights once I realized they couldn't handle water. The filter back here is a relatively cheap hang-on back. I've got it off of Amazon because it said made in America. I immediately threw away the carbon filter cartridge and filled it up with lava rock. And that's how I run all of my hang-on back filters. I fill them with lava rock and they grow beneficial bacteria and become a biological filter rather than a chemical filter. I have plants in my aquarium. I don't want all of those wonderful compounds and minerals, nutrients, all getting captured by carbon that I have to throw away and then buy another. It just doesn't make sense. I want the plants to use them. So let's talk a little bit about the plants. The big one here, this tank recently got a really big haircut. Pogostemon stellatus octopus cultivar is what you see here. In and amongst it, growing around it, Bacopa caroliniana and Bacopa monieri. There's also Rotala rotundifolia down there. A bunch of Java moss. Several types of Java fern. I do not know my Java ferns apart, but there's one variety. There's another variety back in the back. This one is called Wendelev. I do know that one. Some people, jazz hands. Anyway, not that that's what you're supposed to call it. This grass-like plant is Dwarf Sagittaria. Dwarf Sagittaria is a great aquarium grass that spreads kind of moderately. It's not fast growing in most substrates and water. It's controllable. You don't really get to pick which direction it grows, but it does nice, and it grows up to what I'm going to call a tank height, or a height in the water column of about maybe 13 or 14 inches. Each blade, on the other hand, might be 20 inches long at full growth, but overall the plant doesn't, you can see they kind of curve. They're not standing straight up. What else is in here? Some really cool other ferns. In and amongst there's some small Anubias. That's like a gold coin Anubias. This is very cool. This is a small fern that I took, Bulbitis heteroclita, which is also called the, let's see, El Nino fern. So I think that's a combination of maybe one of the funniest names of any of the plants. So El Nino, Spanish, little boy, and Bulbitis heteroclita, the Latin name. That gives me a chuckle. There's another small one growing here. I've tied them to lava rock. They will, being most of these ferns, like the Java ferns and the Bulbitis stuff, they are what we call epiphytic plants. They won't actually generally sink roots down into substrate. They would rather cling onto something at water's edge or just below the water's edge. Up here, this is my pitiful plant because, as you can see, ram's horn snails eat the crap out of water sprites. Let me zoom on this. I'm not good at keeping water sprite. I have killed these things over and over and over and over again in all of my tanks. So I'm not sure if it's just the ram's horn snails that are getting them, or if it's a combination of lighting, water parameters, my water conditions specific to my home, or whatever. Moving over a little bit, this is another plant that I have a hard time with, especially in tanks with ram's horn snails, Alternanthera lilicina. And it's struggling, but not doing well. Above it, here's a local plant that I collected that might be Ludwigia ovalis. I'm not positive about that, and I won't lie, but there are quite a few other Java ferns of several different types. Down here in the bottom, that's something that I tried to remove from this tank, Hygrophila deformis, which is a fantastic aquarium plant. It's wonderful, especially for people who might have big spaces and want something that's really going to bush out. That bit right there is a bit of it also. Over here is maybe a better example, but I have trimmed this all but to extinction in this aquarium. Next to it, just to the left, that's parrot's feather. This is also, but that one's been trimmed and picked apart. If you don't readily clip these and replant them, they end up looking like that. So that is what it is. Java moss. Some more Anubias down here. Lots of moss. But let me see if I can get some of the guppies in here now. This tank has some fantastic looking half blacks, and like that little guy that's kind of mid-screen at the moment is just beautiful. There are several, this guy here has some gold on him. The one that's kind of mid-screen, he is a half black, but obviously had some mixed genetics that are in there, so maybe he'll kind of dance in some of the light and we'll see some of that gold on him. Hard to tell in this current lighting because of the color of the light. Most of these females in here are not colored finnage, but this one does have some. There are a few females in here with colored fins. Grandma Guppy down here, she's several years old. There are actually quite a few guppies in here who are more than just a year or two. Let me see if I might be able to find one of them. This male right here is 2 or 3 years old. The females tend to get really large as they get older because actually when they go through menopause, something in their body shifts, and yes, live bears do go through menopause. They are menopausal. Post-menopause, they start growing again, and they can get quite big. So if you ever see a female guppy that's just huge, she's probably a few years old. She's post-menopausal. That's why she's large. Her body shut off the breeding and such devices and has energy for growth. So there are a lot of fish in here. Let's see. I generally keep track of how many there are with chalk marker. Lucky you guys, I kind of cleaned the outside of the glass before I shot this, but you can see here roughly 90. Yeah, I understand my handwriting is abysmal. There are about 18 adult males, about 15 adult females, roughly 30 fry when I counted. That was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, and about 20 juveniles. So those numbers might have changed a bit, but they're going to be going up more than going down. From time to time, I find a fish that shouldn't be in here, like maybe a young juvenile male that is developing some red finnage, and that is because he probably had a mother that got stuck in here who had mated with a fish that was in another tank or something. And guppies can store semen in them for quite some time, for several months at least, more than one birthing cycle. That's for sure. Beyond that, I've heard some tales, but I'm not sure beyond that. But I can say yes, definitely they can. So every once in a while, I find a juvenile in here. There's one who is. This one's going to develop a little bit of a red tail on him. I can just tell by looking. That's what that little guy. He's just starting to get some red. You can't really see it yet, but I'm familiar with these fish. I know that one's going to turn red. And he will be a half black red because that's some DNA he's got. And that's a gene that's carried, I believe, on the Y chromosome. But still, from time to time, I see guppies that are growing up that just aren't the right color, and I have to switch them from tank to tank. If they're a female and they got moved from tank to tank, they may have mated and may be carrying some genetics into that tank, and they may even birth some fry that aren't really what I want in that tank. So I have to wait on them to grow up a few months, color out, and then I can get them out. So that's about all I've got to say about this tank at the moment. Thanks for sticking with me. If you enjoy these tank talks, please give me a like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you have any questions, hit me up. Also, feel free to check our local Arkansas Planted Aquarium Club Facebook group if you enjoy this stuff. I do postings pretty regularly, and I'm definitely trying to get back into the YouTube stuff. Thanks very much. I hope you have a great day.